Okay, it is 6:30, so I will call the meeting to order. It is Monday, May 23rd. We are at the Oregon School District Innovation Center at Oregon High School. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak, Ms. Garrison, yes. Dr. Lakuta, yes. Mr. LeBrun,
yes.
Mr. Pankratz,
Here.
Ms. Wright, here. Ms. Flanagan.
Present. The board does have a quorum, and Ms. Heitz has given me, we have proof of notice, so this meeting has been duly noticed. If anyone would like to take a look at that, that will be with her. And then we have an agenda tonight that consists of our consent calendar. We have some information items. We have one action item, and then we do have some important information items about school finance update from Mr. Weiland, and then our normal items of vision and strategic planning, teaching and learning, and the superintendent's report. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Would you like the second? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Moving on to consent calendar. We do have the following donations that I'd like to read. $219.49 from the Oregon Choral Boosters for sheet music for Netherwood Knoll Elementary. $477 for choir field trip to Children's Theater of Madison from the Oregon Choral Boosters. $500 for Oregon Community Scholarship from the class of 2022. And then the following individuals to the A-Team Scholarship, all for $100. Cindy Olander, Jason Zurowick, Jim Pliner, David Piavanetti, Brittany Spencer Grant, Andy Weiland, Candace Widensee, and Darcy Krieger. So thank you to those groups and individuals for their donations and support of our students in the Oregon School District. Thank you very much. All right. And then the board did have an additional resignation, so you do have the resignations and retirements and staff assignments in front of you as well. So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Is there all right, we have a motion and a second. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Pankratz,
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun,
Yes.
Ms. Garrison, yes. Dr. Lakuta, yes. Ms. Wright, yes. Ms. Flanagan.
Yes, motion carries. All right, moving on to B, information items. Before we start with that, we have a little bit of an honor tonight. Mr. Tim LeBrun, you have been recognized by WACVB for demonstrating a high level of commitment to Wisconsin public school students by participating in WASB professional development opportunities, and you are now a Level 1 award winner. So congratulations. You're welcome. There you go. All right, moving on to public comment. Katie, do we have anyone registered for public comment? Okay. Anyone here for public comment? One more time, anyone here for public comment? Okay. Moving on to OEA report. Do we have any representatives from the OEA here this evening? All right, seeing none. Then we are on to student report. Nate, welcome. The floor is yours.
Hello, thank you again for having me. Our student report is pretty short as things wrap up for the summer. We have our finals week schedule all figured out and stressing everyone out. Our last 3 days of school, which are the June 3rd, 6th, and 7th, will be block scheduled for finals, which means a shorter day for all of us, which we are all happy about. We have AP tests all wrapped up. We are awaiting results that we'll get back in July. We have our clubs and organizations report, which includes the band concert next Thursday, which will include a feature of Unspoken, a piece including the full choir, orchestra, and bands, but it's mainly a band concert. That will be on June 2nd, 7:30 in the PAC. Sports are in full swing with our soccer, track, baseball, golf, and tennis teams all having events today, as you can probably tell from the parking lot. And the Edgerton and Madison West and East schools will be participating in those events. School soccer, girls varsity soccer, have their conference championship at Sauk Prairie High School tomorrow at 7. And then Silence of the Hams, a theater production, will take place here tomorrow in the PAC. And then our student superintendent council report includes mostly planning for next year and how that will look, which will include a summer meeting to get kind of everyone set and increased involvement with freshmen and getting people accustomed to the new situation at high school.
Great. Thank you very much, Nate. Okay, June 7th, last day of school. Is it a half day or full day?
Full day.
Full day. Okay, I was asked that at the dentist today, and I didn't know. So if my hygienist is watching, it's a full day. Sorry, I didn't know that. Okay, moving on to C, action items. First on the agenda is approval of the CISA 2 contract. So I will turn that over to Dr. Bergstrom and Dr. Widensee, I believe.
Okay. I think I got it. Do I have to have it out? Okay. So tonight I have for you the CISA request, the contract for CISA. This year we only have the audiology required service for our students with hearing impairments. So I would just ask for your approval to continue to contract with CISA 2 for our audiology services.
All right, we'll go around to see if anyone has any specific questions about CISA 2 and the audiology services. Go ahead, Tim.
That's the only service in this. Are we still contracting with them for driver's ed? Or is that a completely separate contract?
That is not a,
It's not really, we don't really pay them. They just provide the service to our students and we coordinate with them. So there's no payment to them other than our parents pay them directly.
Oh, okay. So we just make it available.
Correct. And we schedule around.
Okay.
That'd be correct, Mr. Planner?
I am so sorry.
Just say yes.
Yes.
A separate agreement with them.
For that specifically? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions of Dr. Widensee about the audiology services that we do with CISA 2? This is a reoccurring contract, so go ahead, Heather.
I just had a question of how this year compares to last year cost-wise.
well, it's a little bit more because we've had an increase in students. So we have a few more students who need the service.
So it's based on the per student
Yep.
count. Okay, got it, thanks.
Anyone else? Any questions?
So
Go ahead,
then
Mary.
is the cost per student the same, or has the cost per student changed at all?
That is a great question and one I didn't come prepared for.
That's okay.
I'm sorry to say. There tends to be a little bit of an increase per IEP. But
All right, any additional questions? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? I'll second. All right, any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuda?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pinkeritz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Welcome, Anna.
thank you.
How was the high jump? He got it. He did awesome. All right, great. Okay, moving on to D, discussion items, committee reports. Heather, policy.
Yep, we are picking up meeting in early June. So we'll have dates for everybody and recaps at our next meeting.
Okay, sounds great. Vision steering, Troy.
And we have not met since our last meeting and scheduled for a June meeting.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, moving on to E, information items. First on the agenda is school finance update. So I will turn it over to Mr. Wyland.
Thank you. Oh yeah, thanks. So tonight we want to just kind of go through some very, very high level financial information. I'm kind of a detail guy, so this is a little bit of a challenge for me, but we tried to keep it to basically just the things that we need to kind of focus on. So first of all, I want to express appreciation to Erica, because Erica helped kind of do the things that I'm a little bit more challenged with. So if it was just my presentation, it would have been a lot of bullet points. And so she spruced it up a little bit and made it a little bit more understandable for folks. So learning goals tonight, we got 5 of them. So how the Oregon School District is funded, that does differ based on each school district. So depending on how school districts, kind of basically the main component of it is how much equity per student exists in the community will determine where the funding comes from. So not something you need to keep in mind right now, but that's just how that works. Key variables that determine the amount of resources available. We'll talk about that briefly. Some basic trends in Wisconsin school finance kind of over the last 10 years or so. And then our current financial situation, which will be kind of a recap from our staffing updates that we've provided over the last March and April. And then some future financial challenges for the school district, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So hopefully we'll be able to hit all 5 of those points for you. So before we get too far into this, I wanted to define basically the funds that we're talking about. So in school districts and governmental accounting, basically there are funds. And each fund is designed to pay for or handle an expense and revenue associated with it. Our funds that we're going to be talking about today are 3 basic funds, and they're kind of all married together because of something called the revenue limit that we're going to talk about. But these funds are all defined by something called WOOFR, which we affectionately call in the school business office, and that defines kind of the funds, that long account string, if you ever see it, it defines each dimension of that string. And 4 out of the $5 that our district spends in total are related to these 3 funds that we're talking about. So the idea here is not to confuse you with a lot of things. It's really to focus on those things that are most important to our funding. The dollar that's left out of that $5, those dollars are really restricted to to very specific things. For instance, debt service. We can only use dollars in the debt service fund, not the non-referendum debt service, but the referendum debt service fund for debt service related to referendums. We can only use dollars associated with food service in the food service fund. So we're not going to talk about those funds. We're just going to be talking about 4/5 of everything, which is the 3 funds we talked about: general, special education, and non-referendum. Any questions about that? Okay, we're really focused on the majority of where our spending is and where we have some flexibility. So if you add those 3 funds together, we call them our operating funds, because like I said, they're married together and they're kind of related. So the majority of our funds come from property taxes and state aid. Talk about that real briefly. It used to be, when I got to Oregon, that state aid was slightly larger than property taxes. But if you recall, a minute ago, I talked about the amount of money behind each student determines that balance. And so as we've become, quote unquote, more wealthy per student in our evaluations, we've become more property tax focused than state aid. Okay? The other funding sources that are out there are grants, general grants. Those could be federal or state. They're fairly minor. They're mostly related to special education, if we were to say what the majority of that 9% is. And then there's a thing called per pupil aid. I want to talk about that for just a second. And basically what that is it's a new categorical aid that the state gives us per student. It's unrestricted. We can do whatever we want with it. But essentially what's happened over time is when the school financial system was created, the number of students helped determine how much funding we had, and that would kind of have an impact on how much state aid and how much property taxes we pay. But over time, a certain group of legislators, one side of the aisle, you would say, have wanted to just give per student aid to school districts. And instead of funding the aid formula, they've broken out and provided it outside of that aid formula. It's still a revenue that we can use for any purpose, but it's outside of the state aid component. So if you would add property taxes, state aid, and per pupil aid together, we're at 84% of kind of our funding. Property taxes and state aid are related to a revenue limit, and we're going to talk about that in just a second, and we've mentioned it before. The other components, we won't mention any time about that, but the open enrollment amount, we do spend quite a bit of time talking about typically during the year, and that is something we kind of have some control over, except the students obviously need to come. And there's an expense related to that as well, because we are lucky enough to have more students come to our district than leave, but we do have some students that do leave. So we're kind of like 2-to-1 type of thing. So those are our major operating fund resources. We're mostly property taxes, mostly state aid, and those are contained in what's called a revenue limit. So revenue limits have been in place almost 20 years now, 30 years, sorry, do some math. Since 93, 94, they've been in place. Okay, I'm going to tell you how that works in a second. But basically the district's, the amount of revenue that we can receive from those 2 purposes are defined by it. and it makes up 84% of the dollars that we get. Okay, between those three things. So it's the majority. It really decides how much revenue, how much flexibility we have is determined by the single formula. Remember, 4/5 is in our operating funds, and now we're in the 80% range that is driven by this one formula. So school financing real complex, but we're trying to focus in on those things that matter the most. You bet. The revenue limit decides that. You're going to see that in a formula in just a second. That's okay. That's okay. So the graph, and I didn't talk about this, you're going to see this graph several times, but this graph shows how much money we've been getting over time. Now, if you look on the left side of the left side of the graph, you'll see something very predictable, right? Steady increases. That's when the revenue limit was in its heyday, so to speak. And it actually goes all the way back to 1993-94. It was a predictable number. Every year we had a little bit of a raise. Everything was good. When the recession hit in 2008, things changed. They didn't allow it to continue to increase. They basically set the dollar amount at $200 even. You see that for those 2 years. And then Act 10 happened. And Act 10 happened, we lost about $600 per student. Okay, that was the way we balanced the budget that year. Wasn't really even a choice. It was a state law. The state law basically said in Act 10 that in the past, the school districts in Wisconsin would pay both the employer and the employee side of the pension cost. Okay, both were around 6.5% or so. The law required employees to pick up that employee side that they hadn't been paying before. So essentially what happened was our employees, all of our employees equally, took a 6% hit in their salary. That's how we balanced the budget, and that's what that $600 reduction was. After that happened, we got a little bit of an increase. I'm trying to remember, I think it was about $150 for 2 years in the next biennium. And we almost edged up to $200. And then I think there was another financial situation that happened, and we went back down, and then we've gone up a little bit. The 1920, I think we got a really nice increase. The governor did some vetoes that allowed us to get a little bit more money than we had been getting in the past. And then you see what happened to last biennial budget. We had zeros both for this year and for next year. Any questions about that? We're going to come back to this chart a couple times, but yeah.
Heather, go ahead and use your microphone, okay, so people can hear your question.
Sorry. So is this the same around the state
Yes. This chart right here fits for everywhere.
for everybody?
Yep.
Okay.
And I should have said this before. You see the revenue limit and the per pupil increase? Remember I said depending on the political party in charge, they'll put their money someplace? Well, I combine these. So we have both the revenue limit adjustment as well as the per pupil increase. And so they're merged into one chart here. Okay? All right. Now everybody look at line 3, column B. This is what the revenue limit really looks like. We're not going to go through this, all right? But I wanted to give you a sense for the complexity of it, and I'm boiling it down to the simplest components so that you don't yell at me too much when the next slide comes up. So here is the next slide. So this really runs the revenue limit. So we're going from this to this, so hopefully it's not too bad. A 3-year average of our resident students, okay? So there's a kind of a softening, depending on if you're increasing or decreasing, that happens with a 3-year average. So when you're growing, that can be a hindrance because you don't get to count the students as fast as you'd like. When you're declining, it helps kind of soften the blow a little bit. And then we take the product of the prior year spending per student, okay, what did we spend last year? And this is simplified, but what we spent last year per student, plus the allowable increase per student. So that could be, that's what the state decides. It used to be predictable until about 2008. Now it's not. Now we have to wait and find out what's in the biennial budget before we know what it is, before we had a formula that we could anticipate. And then plus exemptions, and they're either recurring or non-reoccurring. We're going to come back to exemptions in a little while, but there are things that can happen through a referendum. There are things that happen because of something called transfer of service. Transfer of service is when we get a student from another district who has an IEP or some special needs that they have that move to our district. And if we have to add staff or add services, we get an exemption that we are allowed to basically include in our property tax bills so that we can service that student. The year after it happens. So it's always lagging. And there's some other things, but those are the main ones, kind of referendum related or what's called transfer of service. You take that times the 3-year average, whatever the product of that's in the brackets, and you get our revenue limit. Okay, and then down below, but again, is the revenue limit increases. So that's the allowable increase per student. That's what that graph is, plus a per student categorical aid component. Any questions there? That's okay.
Okay. So, and this is 2 years at a time, right?
Usually we know the allowable increase per
Right.
student 2 years at a
So,
time
like,
in the biennial budget.
The 0 is a 2-year zero.
Yep.
So that's
Yep.
not changing for
Yep.
2 years.
So Andy loses hair faster one year than compared to the other because I don't have any clue
Right.
what the legislature is going to do. And sometimes they take a lot of time to figure out what they're going to do.
But then you do for 2 years.
But then I do for the next year typically. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Thanks.
All right.
So Andy?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's
So,
okay.
The exemptions recurring and non-recurring, I know you said one was the referendum, that's a non-recurring. What was the recurring again?
So you can do, so transfer of service is typically recurring, meaning it happens, once you build it in, it becomes part of the base, the amount of monies that you spend per student. So you can actually do that on a referendum too.
I see.
So there is something called a recurring. So when we built Forest Edge, we did do a recurring for all the staff that we had to add associated with that.
Got it.
And so that's there every year for us to be able to continue to pay the staff.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? All right. So then I thought it would be kind of fun, because that's what Andy does, is we turned it into a percentage basis.
You've
So
now entered third person.
yes,
Got
yes.
it.
So I thought it would be kind of interesting to say, what's this on a percentage basis? Because dollar amounts, right, we don't know how we value that. So from a percentage basis as to what our total spending is per student in the revenue limit, we turned that into percentages. And you can kind of see that, hey, we were just above 2% there for a while, and then we dropped down to 2%, and then we went down to negative 6%. And we popped up in the difference between probably 1 to 2, something like that. Jumped around, got up above 2% a couple years ago, and then this graph is missing next year's number, and that'll become apparent in a second. But there's a 0 there for 21-22. There would also be a 0 on 22-23. The reason it's apparent is I thought, boy, that would be kind of cool to compare that to the CPI. So where does this figure out in the CPI? So Andy really gets excited. I'm doing third person again. Why? How this works, right? And so on the left-hand side of this grid, this graph, you can kind of see that, hey, we're playing around it. We're in the ballpark. Actually, in the recession, I remember I was at a chamber meeting and somebody said, oh, what are you guys going to do from the school district's point of view? And I was like, we're going to be fine. Because the orange line, you see when it dipped down like that, this probably won't work with with a laser. When it dipped down like that for the CPI to 0 or slightly under 0, we were still getting 175 or so per student. So we were fine until Act 10 came. And then Act 10 came and kind of recaptured all the difference in the CPI between the blue and the orange line there. And then we kind of got back into the groove a little bit, and we were kind of following along, so to speak, until recently. So the first problem was there. Our next problem is obviously here. Now keep in mind, that blue line is the CPI that we used the highest number on the right-hand side is just under 5%. The next year will be above 5%, and the orange line will stay at 0. This is the crux of where we're at right now. This is our problem. It's not just our problem. It's every school district in the state of Wisconsin's problem. Okay? All right. So that type of policy, right? You know, what's been going on here, what impact has that had from a statewide perspective? Sorry, I don't know why it's doing this. 2002, Wisconsin per pupil spending, this is on average for the entire state of Wisconsin, we were 12th in the nation, or 11% above the national average. In 2018, we had fallen to 23rd in the nation, or 2.2% below the national average. We're doing some calculations here, but we believe, and we've had it verified, that 2019, Wisconsin's per pupil spending will be 25th in the nation, or 4.5% below the national average. We had the largest drop in the nation of all states in that time period. Nobody else moved as much as we have. 0 increases for 21, 22, and 22, 23 will exacerbate that problem. I'm not aware of any state that's not giving their school district additional funding. We will be in the bottom half in the nation as soon as those numbers come out in a couple of years. All right, so what have we been doing? What has been our kind of story, so to speak? So in March of 2019, when we kind of shut down, we still provided education, but we provided it differently through online means. We did save some money. We saved some money with transportation and some other things. We couldn't operate normally, so we did save about $1.5 million. The following year, 2021, we also had some savings because we were doing all kinds of different ways of delivering services. So I think we had 5 different changes to our school bus routes that year. So we had another savings. So we had 1.5, $1 million. So this year we actually had $2.5 million, and we prioritized mental health, some staff spending, some online learning spaces, trying to decrease energy usage because we know that that's going to be starting to rise up on us. And then ESSER is basically focused on student academic support and more mental health support. So ESSER, just briefly, stands for Elementary, Secondary, and Emergency Relief Funds. It's come in 3 different phases, and we were the last state to have our ESSER 3 approved because of some disagreements, I guess, at the statewide level. And we just got that completely approved here in the last month. We still don't have access to the Wise Grants portal in order to put it in, but we have been told that the numbers that we have are official now. We are reserving some funds for kind of any shortfalls that would happen down the road, but we have, for the most part, allocated probably about 80% of our ESSER funds or spent for spending over the next year. And then the $2.5 million, we have basically allocated the majority of that as well. Okay. So where do we spend our money? That might be some question, and you've probably seen graphs on this, but Erica came up with a new way to just show this. Salaries and benefits, that's where we are. We are a people-oriented business, no question about it. So 78% are salaries and benefits. Purchase services, if we were to run, for instance, our own busing program rather than purchase that, you know, a good percentage of that 15% would move into salary and benefits as well. But other things in purchase services would include utilities, any type of service that we purchase, audiology, that type of thing. And then we have what's called non-capital objects. Those are supplies, materials, that type of thing, books, that type of thing. And then other is a very, very small number. Could be anything from dues and fees to those types of things, insurances. All right, So here's our challenge in our environment financially. So 2021 school year, we provided a stipend of 1.23% plus the $1,500 per FTE. So I'm not showing that here, but this is kind of trying to look forward. 22-23, if we were to provide the CPI increase to our staff, that's 4.7. We talked about that already. 22-23, 23-24, the projections right now, we only have like 4 months of the 12 behind us, but the projections right now are running somewhere between 6 and 8% on CPI. That becomes known probably in about February or March, I think, of each year. The Wisconsin Employment Commission certifies that for us. So 5.93%, if we were to add those two things together, because this year is just a stipend, it's one-time money that we're using, but if we were wanting to make staff kind of whole with the CPI component, we'd be at 5.39%. That's about $2.1 million. And salary and associated benefits, not health insurance, but Social Security, Medicare, Wisconsin retirement system, that type of stuff. We have if you recall, we talked about this in our staffing thing. We have a shortfall of about $1.15 million right now in next year's budget. So we have a total shortfall of $3.25 million. And next year, we're getting zero amount of new money and per pupil aid. There are some smaller allocations. I'll just be upfront with that. The state did allocate a little bit higher reimbursement for special education. That was nice. That number had been falling down into the low 20% range. They're trying to get it up closer to 30. That will offset some of this new spending, but nothing compared to what we're talking about in numbers here, in rough numbers.
Leslie, did you have a question?
I do. So the 2.1 million that you're talking about, is that presuming that we're at 100% staffing?
Yep.
Okay, so that's not without any lacking in that, where we would need to hire other people on top of that.
If we were to hire more people, yeah, the number would go higher.
But as far as our needs go, would that be where we would need to be though? Or is there a lack in that we would need to look at that as well?
So we are adding some one-time positions. When we were talking about ESSER, I should have said this before, because it's kind of a difference of opinion in our state. So the federal government allocated ESSER funding for basically helping us to get our students caught up and to work through kind of the remainder of the pandemic. So we've allocated, you folks approved our staffing, and our staffing included basically every position that you included in there. New staffing position was funded through ESSER. Okay, that was the intent from the feds. The state leaders seem to imply that we should use that money for this type of stuff. Rather than doing it to help students kind of recover, they would prefer that we use that money to kind of operate our school district. The problem with that, right, is the money's only one time. The feds aren't going to continue to write us checks. So we have a problem with that framework. Now, I will say, from the state's perspective, from the people that say that, there is some interesting things that maybe they didn't think of, or we should just understand. When the federal government allocated those funds, those ESSER funds, it ended up being around, let's say, $1,000 per student for us. So $3.8 million in total, all those ESSER programs. There are districts in our state that are getting over $11,000 per student. So it really was allocated based on poverty, how many students a district had in poverty. So some of the legislators probably looked at it and said, oh my gosh, tens of millions of dollars going to Madison, Milwaukee, Racine. They're going to have so much money they're not going to know what to do with. Not understanding that there's other school districts that didn't get that type of money per student. And that's not to say that those districts don't also have higher needs. I mean, that was really the intent for the federal dollars. So we decided to allocate it the way that the federal folks wanted it to, but that wasn't what the state did. The state leaders, have kind of been saying, they've been saying a couple things that we try to pick up on, but they've been saying, we'll make it up to you next biennium. When you guys talk about fiscal cliff, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but basically I've already described it. We're going to give you more money next biennium, and we're going to make it up to you. But we're also hearing that they're very interested in how much ESSER money is left over. And because some school districts have all that money, they haven't figured out how to spend all of it. We, like I said before, by the end of next year, we'll have spent probably 85% of the dollars. There will be districts that will have lots of money left over that they'll have to figure out how to spend. And the legislators are positioning the next biennial budget based on that, is what we're hearing, which is scary to the rest of us.
Andy, could you explain why this is a recruitment and retention issue?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
what our neighbors are doing, et
Yep.
cetera.
Yep. So the numbers that you see on this chart are indicative, at least the first 2 years, 2021, 22, 23, are pretty indicative of what we're hearing the local school districts are thinking of giving their staff members. So that's why Dr. Bergstrom mentions the title of this. If we aren't competing with them, we won't be able to retain or recruit staff. So the local market is really there. I wouldn't say that that's entirely in place in the entire state, but definitely what we're hearing around the Madison area is that's what's happening. Some of those districts, we haven't allocated this yet at all, right? I'm just kind of sharing this. Some of those districts are actually out on a limb and already are committing to their staff in these amounts of money without the funding.
Well, fund balance is what they're saying.
Fund balance, they're doing a lot of variety of things. There's a district that's decided they're not buying any technology. They're putting it on hold for a year. The problem is they won't be buying technology for any year in the future because now that recurring revenue is going to be paying on salaries. So that's one district that I know is that. Some are using ESSER funds. They're using the funds that the state wanted to do that way. Some are growing. We have been fairly flat right now. We have kind of recovered from where we were back to kind of pre-pandemic levels, but we're not growing quite as fast as Mr. Roffers was saying that we should, even though those houses are popping up and happening. So we still anticipate that we will grow, but the pandemic's kind of thrown a little bit of a loop to things.
I just want to make sure we're asking clarifying questions. This is not a discussion item, it's an information item on the agenda, so I want to make sure we're staying down that path, just as a gentle reminder, okay?
Yep.
We will be discussing this plenty, but keep this as an information item at this point in time, okay?
Question. Hopefully it's clarifying.
Yep.
Tell me if this is not clarifying. So what Leslie was getting at was this is for the current staff, but for the people who we used those ESSER funds to create those 1 or 2 year positions, that has an end.
Yep.
And this number does not reflect the extension of their positions.
You are absolutely correct.
Okay, and then my other clarifying question is this 1.15 million.
Yep.
That is or is not coverable with ESSER.
We have not. It could be, but that hasn't been our approach.
Because the ESSER funds are allocated elsewhere, or we're just not.
At this point, a good portion of them are allocated elsewhere. We would not have enough left over to cover the full 1.15.
That's where I was getting at. Is we don't have it just sitting there to allocate. We don't have enough.
We don't have enough.
Yep.
We have several $100,000, but we don't have enough.
Got it.
Andy, just one question, and maybe maybe you've covered in a later slide, but it's not as if the state doesn't have money. Can you refer how much money is in the reserves in terms of state?
I do not have a slide on that, but it's 3.8 billion. That's with a B. I like saying that. $3.8 billion of ongoing revenue that they have not allocated. And then there's an additional I'm probably wrong on this, 1.2 billion in the rainy day fund. So they do have plenty of dollars available.
So when you showed the graph in previous, I mean, that was really a recession, but the state is not in a recession right now. So
No.
when we look at the dip in the graph, those were previously, that was state funding shortfalls.
Correct.
But the state does not have a funding shortfall currently, correct?
No, their revenues are extremely strong.
Okay, thank you. Go
And
ahead, Tim.
again, the holdback from the state, your best description of the reason for the holdback is because they feel that schools as a whole are flush with ESSER money, and they want schools as a whole to spend that money first.
I think that would be accurate. I think the part that they're missing is the variability
Yes.
in the amount of money per student.
Right. The $1,000 for us and 11,000, and that's why I say, and I emphasize,
Yep.
as a whole,
Yep.
they're looking for schools in Wisconsin to spend the money they have in ESSER funds.
I would also say they seem to be very interested in fund balance, which we're going to talk about as a next thing.
And whenever I hear fund balance, I think savings. That's just what I equate it to. At least the fund balance we talk about is how much we've set aside, accumulated, that hasn't been allocated in savings.
I think that's definitely one way to look at it.
And there too, there are districts across the state who have significant fund balances, and those ones that are declining in size, who have been spending fund balance over the years, and they have been spending down their savings.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So just to further clarify that, and we actually have a slide on that, so it was a perfect transition. Fund balance is an accounting word that's a similar word would be equity. Okay, so the accounting equation. Do you guys have accounting? All right. What's the accounting equation? Assets minus liabilities equals fund balance or equity. Perfect. You didn't look at the sheet, did you? All right. You have a proud mom who's not paying attention over there. All right, so equity equals assets minus liabilities, and AKA what's left over. All right, so, and we actually have a policy, 611 on this, and it was one of the first policies when I came to Oregon that we worked on. Okay, and it was actually, I want to say the DPI copied it, but they didn't have a policy at the time as to a suggested fund balance amount. They do now, and it mirrors our board policy. And our board policy basically says to provide adequate working capital sufficient to meet the district's cash flow needs. Okay, we get our funding at different times during the year. The majority of our funding comes from property taxes and state aid that come kind of at the later half of the school year. So we are basically living on our fund balance in the fall of each school year until January, February, when those tax collections come in, okay? So it also functions as a safeguard to fund unanticipated expenses. When the pandemic happened, I brought this to you, and I said, I don't know what's going to happen, right? I didn't know if the feds were going to provide us funding. We had no idea. We didn't know who the president was or anything. And I said, this is anticipated. This is why this fund balance exists, for situations exactly like that. We were lucky enough not to have to dip into it. To demonstrate fiscal responsibility. So this is related to our bond rating. If you're ever going to issue debt, this is a huge component to what Moody's and Standards & Poor's look at, and then they give you a rating when you go out to sell your bonds. So the investment people that are going to basically loan you the money know what kind of risk they're undertaking, okay? If you don't have much of a fund balance, or it's kind of moving all over the place, or it's going down, they're going to view that as you're a little bit more risky. I would like a little bit more return, all right, interest on my investment with you or my borrowing with you. So keep that in mind. And then the last thing was the district's unassigned fund balance be maintained for sufficient working capital. So it's kind of a little bit of a recap of number one, just with a little bit of changing in the define. So why is that important? This is a graph that's in your financial reports tonight, okay? And you have a 3-year trend of what's going on with our fund balance. 1999-20 is the blue line, okay? And then we have the orange line being 2021 and the green line being 21-22. It's going up. You remember the chart I showed you though, right? We saved $1.5 million in 1999-20. So have $1.1 million or $1.0 million in 2021. We're spending that this year. We didn't start spending it until January, February. That's why you see the green line go below the orange line, and we haven't spent all of it. We're going to spend the other $750 at the end of June. So that green line is going to continue to decrease a little bit. Okay? So what sticks out here? The blue line, the orange line. In November, December, and actually this is the end of the month, the middle of the month is a little bit lower than those lines, those numbers, because it says month-end cash balance. And we have payrolls in the middle of the month. So kind of after that first payroll in November, that line's a little bit lower than where it's at right now. So we don't have $16 million sitting in a fund balance all year round. We're down to under 2, probably right around 2 to $3 million probably at the end of this year. Next year in that month. At the end of the year, yeah, we'll be back up to July, probably around, for all these funds actually, because they're commingled, right around that $8 million mark. Yeah.
So after all, where do we normally sit, right? What do we have that's really, really there, and what do we have as what's the cushion? Is the 2 to 3 million is kind of like really what
if our goal is to cash flow without having to go to the bank and saying, hey, can you give us a
Right.
loan? Then you want to look at the lowest point on that graph.
Okay.
So in the lowest point in that graph this November was around $6 million, which is more than adequate.
Right.
But we're going to spend 2.5 of that,
Right.
and so we should be under 4
Okay.
next November.
So you anticipate it being under 4 as
Yeah, and that's
normal.
fine. I'm not overly worried about that. We
Right.
should be fine.
Yeah,
As
okay.
as our spending continues to increase, though, and if our dollar amount stays stable or goes down, right, eventually we have to increase that. I was talking about that actually pre-pandemic, before all this stuff kind of happened, that we might have to look at our policy related to fund balance and maybe have to start increasing it again. We've had the benefit of 2 years where we were able to save a little bit of money because of the pandemic. Now we're spending it down. We'll have to see what it feels like next November.
Okay, and can you just quickly, I should have written it down, or I could go back to the slide of the 5.63%. I just wanted,
Oh, yeah. This one?
got it. Okay, I needed to see the numbers. Thanks.
Yep, no worries. All right, we are wrapping up. Yeah,
On that, the last one.
This one.
Yes, that one. So you anticipate that the green line will go back up in June, July?
yeah. It'll follow the same trajectory because it's based on when we receive funding from the state, essentially.
Okay.
And the state, this is kind of goofy. The state actually pays us toward the end of the year the majority of our money because they're playing some timing games, or have in the past. Now that they enjoy a significant rainy day fund balance and all that kind of stuff, they could, in fact, they did this last year. They changed the law a little bit to provide us a little bit more money quicker than they normally did. In the past, they would actually provide us funding for this school year in July, which is after our fiscal year,
Okay.
because they were struggling with financial situations.
And will the trajectory of the upward line be comparable to the orange or blue lines? Or?
I would think that it's going to be between probably the orange and the blue. It'll go down a little bit more, simply because we still have half of the $1,500 needs to be paid out to all of our employees.
Okay, Thank you.
We did that as a retaining mechanism so that people would finish the school year out for us.
Go ahead, Tim.
Andy, in years past, and I don't recall if we continue to do that, we've essentially funded our own line of credit. That's the cushion that we have. Do we have a line of credit in place with the bank?
I think we let that expire.
Okay.
We
And I
had a-
thought that
yeah.
that was the case, but that is something that, most businesses have, most school districts have, and something we may have to consider
That would be
if
another.
that cushion,
Yeah.
if just as a fallback.
Yep.
Again, we don't pay for it if we don't use it, but it provides this false floor cushion if we need it.
Yeah, absolutely. That usually school districts would go and sell bonds out, but we don't need it for more than a 40-some days typically. And so we've used the line of credit. We did that a couple years ago before the referendum in 2018 to purchase basically the school site that Forest Edge is on. So that year we did, I think, go in the hole a little bit, and we needed to do that.
Sure.
Just
Again,
because of timing.
for timing differences.
Yep.
You bet. Short term.
Yep.
Timing
But
differences.
essentially the policy kind of says, it sets the floor for us to kind of say what the number should be rather than a percentage of fund balance or anything like that. And it made sense. And so, like I said, if you go to DPI's website, that is their recommendation now. Just cover your cash flow. If the state wanted to access that fund balance, they'll just pay us a little sooner, and then school districts would have the ability to do that.
Sure. Most recently, what kind of line of credit did we have available to us? Couple
boy.
$1 million? $1 million?
Yeah, I want to say it was a million or two, but it's been a few years.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, Oregon One Community Bank was awesome in dealing with that. All right, so concept of one-time money. I've already touched on this. Nothing too crazy here. I wanted a Wile E. Coyote with a thing going off there, but we couldn't find one of those. So, but basically the concept is one-time money. You can only spend one-time money one time. And so whether it's fund balance, whether it's federal funding that's one-time in nature, we have a situation where we have a problem for sure at $1.15 million, depending on how we treat our employees, which I think we need to consider treating them a certain way if we're going to retain and keep them and attract them. We could have a larger issue that we need to think about. So that's just for that next year, for 22-23. And then we have a CPI number that's higher than it probably has been for 30, 40 years. It looks like heading for us for the year after that. The year after that will be the first year of the next biennium. So we don't know how the state will provide funding to us. When we were talking to our legislative advisor, that he was like, well, how much money do you need? We were talking a few slides ago that, we were getting $200 was kind of a normal year type of thing. We're saying, well, $600, $700 per student. That would get us kind of normal, right? $200 for this year that we didn't get, $200 for next year that we didn't, or next year we get, and then $200 for the third year. I find it hard to believe that the legislatures would provide that to us, but if they were going to be true to what they were saying, that's the type of money we're talking about. So the dangers of the fiscal cliff, obviously, if you don't deal with it, it compounds itself. And so that you will go through that fund balance very, very quickly if you don't kind of right the ship, so to speak.
Andy, just as a reminder, and I know we just approved this, what are the wages and benefits that we funded with one-time dollars?
Approximately 1.1 some million dollars.
Okay.
Between 1 and 1.2, I think.
All right.
For the ESSER funding.
Right.
And then we still have the 1.15 million hole to balance revenues to expenses this year too.
Sure. Okay.
And that was made up of our insurance increase, which I'll remind everybody would have been worse had we not moved to a different provider by probably $100,000 or so. We do have in that 1.15 million the step for our teachers so that they would advance if they were on a particular part of the salary schedule, so they'd move to wherever they're supposed to be. And then just filling in from the one-time money that we used this year to balance the budget, which was that $380,000 that kind of came late during the school year that the governor allocated from a pot of ESSER funds that he had. So you add those three things together, and that's how we get to that $1 million. All right, I think I'm done. So,
All right,
if
any
there's
further
other questions?
Questions? It is not a pretty picture, but this was very informative. Andy, I think hopefully it gave all board members really a baseline, and for community members that are watching, I would really encourage people to really take a look at this. It gives you a really good sense of school finance and where we're at and some decisions we have before us. So Dr. Bergstrom or Andy, you have any other final comments on that before we move on?
The only other thing I would say that I think I was supposed to say is we are not, there are districts that are struggling through the same exact thing. And you can look at them from Verona to DeForest to Sun Prairie to Middleton. They're all working on the same exact problems in this area. And I really think that every school district eventually in Wisconsin will have the same problem, unless they're growing very, very quickly. And only probably about 20% of the schools, 25% of the school districts are growing at all. And I think you'd have to grow pretty quickly in order to kind of be able to fund this.
Yeah, and you know, due to your leadership too, we've already taken some steps in terms of some savings or looked at other issues. So we are, you know, we knew this was sort of coming, so we are taking steps, but you know, that's not going to do it. All right, thank you. Everybody good? Okay. Dr. Bergstrom, moving on to visioning and strategic planning and teaching, learning, and superintendent's report.
Excellent. So with the visioning and strategic planning, there's a slight adjustment to this version. You'll see that we've brought up the 3 to 5 year strategic priorities and put that toward the top of the whole framework. And you know, that is something that we will be talking about in great detail when we meet together again tomorrow. Because we are constantly living within this framework and working within this structure. And a big part of what we'll be discussing at our meeting tomorrow is the 3 to 5 year strategic priorities. And of course, Portrait of a Graduate is a part of all of this, because when we look at what we want for our students by the time they leave us, that's where all of our energies and efforts should be focusing toward that and being able to do that for our students. And that's obviously quite connected to the presentation that Andy just gave us. Because to be able to do all that we want for our students and build out all components of an OSC graduate, as Andy said, we're in a people business. It takes really good people to make that happen. Speaking of good people, our teaching and learning update has a little bit of a staffing update in it for all of you. And as you may already know, our beloved Mary Hermes is leaving the district. And so Lindsay Englehart, our current Brooklyn administrative intern, is stepping into the early learning and 4K director position. So many congratulations to Lindsay. And actually, I think it was just 2 weekends ago that she completed her master's degree. So she has a lot to celebrate right now. And then we also have another administrative intern leaving us, Karen Newland. And so Dan Hilgartner, who's currently the Forest Edge Elementary School physical education teacher, he is taking over as the Prairie View administrative intern. So it's a little bit of an internal shuffle. And we love that because we love to grow our leaders in this district. Lindsay was an administrative intern, and now she will be the 4K director, just like Mary Hermes was an administrative intern, and now she was the 4K principal. So It's something that I think is very much a strength for our district. Now, here's another example. And this, those of us inside the school district have known about Dr. Anderson's new position at the district office for some time, but her families at the middle school and her students at the middle school will be learning of that officially, obviously tonight, but then tomorrow also. So Dr. Anderson has been a long time middle school principal here for us and has done tremendous work. And we have now asked her to come to the district office and work alongside Dr. Widensee, who will be focusing in on special education, and Dr. Anderson will be focusing in on student wellness, in particular mental health supports, coordination of student services departments, social emotional learning, etc. So we know that everything we have seen as a growing trend across the nation, exacerbated by the pandemic, means that coordinated services are even more important now than they ever have been. And so that is why this is one of those positions that was connected to our ESSER funding, because we know how important this is for our kids. That, yeah, it is a good thing. It is a round of applause thing. And I'm also just really, really happy with the fact that we get so much talent internally. You know, people come and they grow with us and they stay with us. And that really is a wonderful feeling. Just like our nurses. You can see many of our nurses have been with us for some time now. Nurse Becky has been here in the Oregon School District for quite a while. All of our nurses are super appreciated. They have done really heroic things over the course of the pandemic, been able to put in more effort than, honestly, between phone calls and tests and data entry, in addition to everything we originally hired them for. They deserve every amount of appreciation we can give them. And our speech and language pathologists, this month was their special day too. And you can see we have quite an amazing team of people who are working with our young people in this area. We also have now been certified, this is kind of cool, a common sense school for digital citizenship curriculum. And we know that this is something that our students need now more than ever. And so the fact that we have a rigorous and articulated curriculum related to this, I think is extraordinarily important. We want to thank our technology teachers for helping to make this happen. That's Mariah Richards, Velvet Holmes, Pam Sangos, Shelley Cotto, and Michelle Minter. So thanks to all of them for the work they're doing on digital citizenship, because it is critical. Some great pictures from the Brooklyn Elementary Garden Day. We have gardens at all of the schools, and they're wonderful. But if you don't have a garden day to get them all spruced up every spring, they are not going to be as helpful to our kids as they should be. So it requires effort, but you can see they're pretty happy doing it. So that's kind of nice. We also had a great Forest Edge band concert, and you can see this is particularly interesting because you have a guest triangle player over on the right side corner. She certainly enjoyed herself there. Concerto for Triangle is what she played, so good for her. The next one is a picture of our kiddos at the Yahara River Writers Contest. So we had several winners this year. It's the Yahara River Writers Anthology Project in writing and cartooning for students in grades 5 through 8. Categories include short story, editorial, poetry, editorial cartoon, and or divider cover. So that is really awesome. And this was an incredible amount of fun. This is the OMS Urban Challenge. It's the 7-0 team, I believe. And we divide kids up into groups of 7 with 1 adult. And they do all kinds of things around downtown Madison to show they know how to navigate. And I'm in there somewhere eating Ian's pizza because I had fun. This was my group, actually, on the chair and on the Bucky. And we aren't supposed to be touching the numbers of 2022, so a university employee and notified of us of that as soon as we touched it. Wasn't good. But boy, it was a really fun day, and the kids, they're in charge. Their problem solving is put to the test, and they did a wonderful job. The 7th grade English mythology walk. It's a gallery walk where students are encouraged to do a deep dive on a figure from mythology. So that is an interesting and fun assignment, and that's from Mrs. Galicia and Miss Wisher. Oh, and this was Friday night and Saturday, the middle school musical, Seussical Junior. And the number of talented students at the middle level singing in front of the entire cafeteria filled with people, it was very, very good. I can still hum a few of those songs in my head because they made it so catchy. And speaking of music, the Wisconsin State Music Conference, our middle school band has been selected to perform there in October. That's a really big honor. So very proud of our students and staff for making that happen. Learner Park Day, there were several of us there too. That was also a wonderful example of a community partnership, because our students in 8th grade go out and work at Learner Park in shifts of 2.5 hours, and they're working in partnership with Oregon Rotary members. Learner Park is a beautiful area here in the village, and our students planted native species, took out invasive species, and of course made the trail more suitable for use this summer. So our students were really wonderful, and it was a beautiful day out at Learner Park. Oops. I think I even went am I going the wrong direction? Boy, I got a trigger happy on there. Okay. So the class of 2026, that's who our freshmen will be. They came and did their transition day at the high school just a little bit ago. It was last week, I believe. Monday. Oh, okay. And they're strongly encouraged to attend freshman orientation. That's Wednesday, August 17th from 8 to 11:30. An email was sent to all incoming 9th grade families with details and sign-up information. And that also happens to coincide with new teacher orientation. So our new educators get the privilege of going downstairs and doing the cheer tunnel with the freshmen as they come in to the gym and are welcome to the high school. OMS and OHS Rhythm and Grooves concert with Katie Ernst. This was a fabulous experience. She has been here for, you guys were involved. So do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, she was here in 2019 or 2020. I was in 8th grade, and that obviously did not last. But she came back, and we had, I think, 3 this year meetings with her. Lots of work with the bass players, and it turned out really well. It was a fun concert.
Thank you for that, Nate. Yes, it was a fun concert. And our OHS tennis team are the Badger Conference champions. So that was really fun. They just had a great win this past weekend in Baraboo. So congratulations to the team. And our OHS track team worked with Special Olympics. This year the track team volunteered at the annual Region 6 Special Olympics track meet on Sunday, May 15th at Oregon High School. So congratulations to our Special Olympics athletes, as well as a big thank you to the kids who volunteered. Our OHS baseball team, they do a youth service. You can see they're doing a few things there. It looks like highway pickup, as in addition to the youth night where they were celebrities for the evening, and it looks like they're giving out autographs. So that's pretty cool. I'm sure that isn't probably what they're doing, but it might be. Don't they all look like they're signing their name? Very exciting. And then our high school environmental studies and ecos group, that's the environmental club, out there cleaning up the pond. A lot of you probably didn't know we had behind the high school. But that's where the class does a lot of their studying and where the ecos group did some cleanup. The OHS Equity Book Club finished up this year. Don't Ask Me Where I'm From was the novel. There were 3 sessions for staff and students and some community members even to come together and talk about the book. It was a fabulous book. For anybody who's interested in a good read this summer, would highly recommend it. You know that adolescent literature is usually the best literature. So don't let that term stop you from reading it. We also had the National Conservation, you can tell I'm getting tired, National Conservation Message Contest writer, Alexa Yokman. She did the Federal Junior Duck Stamp Conservation Message winner. And you can see what that is in the yellow box. So congratulations to Alexa. And high school had some more lunch and learn activities. They had one community bank and Froyo as employers out talking to kids about what was possible. Oops. Probably didn't know about this, people. But on May 11th and 12th, 4 students were part of the OHS Formula Student, or the F1 Club, along with Mr. Lease, where they did a testing event at Road America. They spent the last year building, testing, modifying, and retesting their Formula car for the annual testing event held in May. Students participating were Ashley Bambro, Josh Weber, Dane Severson, and Corbin Graff. So congratulations, students. Year-long project. And congratulations to Zeke Jeske, a finalist in the University of Wisconsin Talent Search related to mathematics. So that is a very high-level achievement. He's identified as one of the most talented young mathematicians taught through the UW Talent Search. He had a special day of recognition and celebration, and Mr. Ebert accompanied Zeke on this special event. So that is quite an accomplishment for Zeke Jeske. We also have school to career example here. This is a young person, a high school senior named Kate, who works at Country View Equine Clinic. You can tell right now, that just by looking at the picture, caring for animals, assisting with procedures, and she's planning to go to UW Platteville to do animal sciences. And then this is kind of fun. We had one of our students, Jake Chung. He played the call to post at the community benefit Guarding Against Cancer. So this is kind of funny. He asked his mom for a ride to the event. All he said was, "Mom, can I get a ride? My teacher asked if I could help out at a party." That's it. It was a pretty major event. It was pretty amazing that Jake could be there. We're very proud of him, so that's great. And then the high school band has a guest composer, Daryl Johnson II. So we just keep doing great things all the way through the end of the year with our music programs. Kids had a good time at prom. You can tell from the pictures. They had a great time. It was a lot of fun. The students were dressed, they were very fancy. And it was just a really fun time for the kids. I'd also have to say it was for the adults who were there too. To see the kids having so much fun and being together, doing the same things, honestly, that most of us probably did at prom too. There's an empty circle and kids take turns dancing across it. I think they've been doing that since a prom ever started. So, a great event. As was the high school seniors night. That's always a very, very touching evening where you see all that these many students have accomplished. You see so many community members who are there supporting our students, representing organizations or families who are giving out scholarships. It is something to be a part of a community that shows that much continual support for students. This was Saturday morning. This was the PTO fun run on Saturday, and you see this is a very group of ambitious young people starting off the race with a lot of joy. And the thing is about young people, that's how they ended the race too. It was also fun to see the really little ones running, and they were very shocked and surprised when people clapped for them at the end of the race. And it was cute as can be, raised money for a good cause, and supported health and wellness efforts. And then today, we had the Friends of Oregon School District Be a Champion Mentor picnic. So goodness, I think we're up to 50 mentors as part of the program. 62. And I would say almost everyone was at the picnic today. And in doing this for a few years, this is a tremendous growth from where we were just a few years ago related to the mentor program. So it was a great event because everybody's so happy to see one another. As a mentor, people often think that they're doing something to help someone else. But after you start that relationship, it is a relationship where you're both helping one another. You're spreading a lot of joy back and forth with that relationship because you come to enjoy one another so thoroughly. And that's what today was. It was a celebration of how much the mentors and the mentees enjoy spending time together. And then we have an alumni spotlight. Izzy Newton, she's in the class of 2021. And Izzy is a freshman at Marian University, and she recently earned the Women's Lacrosse All-Conference recognition. She is the first in program history to be named First Team All-Conference, and the second student athlete in program history to be named Freshman of the Year. So we love to see the success of our OSD alumni, and we're very proud of Izzy. I think that's it.
Great. I always love those reports, and I think most of the board members here do too. And just so you know, I mean, Erica spends a ton of time doing this, and these are also things that are featured on our social media, which Erica does. So she's done a wonderful job in terms of getting the word out about how wonderful our kids are doing and making sure people are aware of all the good news that's coming through our school district. So thank you, Erica, for that. Okay, we are now moving to closing. Future agenda. We know we have some things coming up for us. We've got Portrait of a Graduate that's going to be coming through policy. We got SRO agreement coming. So we've got some things that will be coming to our future agenda in the coming months. Next to checkout, I will just go around the horn and see if anyone has anything for checkout. Welcome, Peyton. You want to say hello? How's soccer practice?
It was a game.
Oh, it was a game. That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry, you won. Okay, so what's up next then?
Our season's done now.
Do you have regionals?
We don't. GAP's regionals are tomorrow, and then we'll see the state run from varsity.
All right, sounds great. Thank you for coming here, hopping in here after your game. Leslie, anything? Anna?
Nothing.
Tim? Nothing. Mary?
Thank you. Nothing.
Heather? Troy? All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Second from Tim. All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned at 7:48. Thanks, everyone.